Welcome to lesson 4.3, the change process. In the previous lesson, in lesson 4.2, we worked on describing or understanding what the change process was and what was involved in the change process. In this section, we're going to discuss the how of leading effective change. This is the change framework that I want to introduce in this lecture. So nurses leading change using this change framework create and implement change through cycles of reflecting, planning, and acting that are based on relational and transformative leadership values. And so we've learned about transformative and relational styles back in week 2. And the other part that I like about this change framework is it reminds me of the nursing process of assessment, diagnosis, planning, implementation, and evaluation. And so through this process, change is planned and operationalized. This process cycles through 6 phases: initiation, reflection and planning, action, critiquing, reflection and planning again, follow-up action, and subsequent cycles. And through this lecture, we are going to go through each of these parts to understand them a little bit better. So let's start off by looking at phase 1, initiation. It's the what, the so what, the why, and the now what. Nurses who lead change face 2 immediate tasks: to identify and engage key stakeholders and to gain clarity about the issue or the problematic condition to be changed. In this context, a stakeholder is one who has a stake in the intended goal or aim of the change process. Critical questions related to stakeholder engagement include: who cares about this issue, who has an interest in this issue, and who has the capacity to influence this situation. So with the team established and the issue or condition to be changed identified, through team collaboration, the group turns its attention to establishing group processes and norms. They accept shared responsibility for the team process and shared decision-making. In the context of continuing to build collaborative relationships, the group, acting as a change agent, begins to create a shared vision, a picture of where it is trying to go. What is the team's vision of what needs to be in place that is not there now? It asks such questions as: what do we want to see happen? What needs to be in place for us to feel or think that we have been successful? What will we take as evidence? And so a quote from an individual who is behind this type of change work says that nursing leaders can create visions and influence others about quality care for patients and families, performance improvement, healthcare systems, and the profession, as they are always looking forward and thinking about the bigger picture. However, it's very important to remember that in the proposed framework, power is always negotiated. In this way, nurses facilitate shared leadership to identify a shared vision to imagine what is possible. Moving on to phase 2, reflection and planning. In this phase, the team develops and articulates the purpose and goals of the change process. It answers the question: what are we trying to achieve? The team reflects on what it knows about the situation and investigates what others have said about the issue. So in this phase, the team gathers knowledge from their experiences and knowledge from the literature. So this reflection is important because too often teams jump into planning without first considering what they already know. The team then identifies goals to focus its change project. Once the purpose and goals are clear, the team articulates the activities that it will initiate to bring about the desired change. One common way to clarify the change that is required is to ask the question: what would it look like if? So an example is when trying to lead a change project in nursing to change from a strictly biomedical perspective of nursing to a more humanistic and health promotion perspective of nursing, one could ask the question: what would it look like if we practice from a nursing health promotion perspective? From this question, the team could build a conceptual map or model that would identify the key components to practice that way. At the same time, the team also considers how it will evaluate what happens when change is initiated and the new processes that are implemented. So moving on to phase 3, which is the action. So we've done the initiation, we've done the reflection and planning, and now we're ready to take action. And so the action phase is critical in this framework because it involves social action in the everyday practice of nursing. So phase 3, as we've said, is action. The team implements the identified components from the conceptual map or model and tries them out in practice. In this phase, the team is putting its knowledge, which they gathered in phase 1, up against its practical knowledge, the knowing how to do something. During this phase, the team members collect evidence of the impact of the change in practice. Team members might learn of the impacts of change by observation or by discussing with others or in groups about their experiences. In this phase, team members reflect on what they learned in practice, and that's the practical knowledge, in relation to how they conceptualized the change, which was the propositional knowledge. So you remember, if you go back to the phase 2, reflection and planning, it was all about building that conceptual model. And so this reflection differs from that in phase 1 because the initial reflection was based upon propositional and or experiential knowledge, but not upon practical knowledge. And so if propositional knowledge is not congruent with practical knowledge, then we need to change our theory, not our practice. The team then reflects on its experiences and plans for the next action phase. It considers questions such as, what do we need to know more about? What other changes do we need to try? And what strategies can we use to understand and monitor these changes? So next up, after analyzing, reflecting, and planning, we go into follow-up action and subsequent cycles. So I want to talk about follow-up action right now. So in follow-up action, the team implements the agreed upon activities to initiate further change in practice and continues to monitor the impact. Follow-up action is redistributed through participation and work of all stakeholders. The follow-up action integrates prior learning and critical reasoning and reflection. So phase 6 is subsequent cycles. A series of cycles are carried out following the same format of planning, reflection, learning, and action. And it's recommended that about 3 to 5 cycles are usually sufficient to bring about transformational change. An advantage of this planning, acting, reflecting approach is to build capacity to continue an ongoing evaluation process, and it's part of initiating change. So in summary, operationalizing this framework for change requires that nurses leading change facilitate the process through cycles of action and reflection that build theory, which is the propositional knowledge, from practice and collect evidence about what constitutes better practices. The team derives theory from practice and then tests that theory in the real world of practice and reflects on their experiences in relation to propositional knowing. This relational, participatory process articulates a way of knowing and acting that is both grounded in our experiential presence in the world as nurses and honors human capacity of sense-making and intentional action.